Welcome to the Tales to Inspire podcast. Before we get started on this episode, I would like to invite you to our community so that you can hear more stories to inspire change within your life and positive change within the systems in which we live. All I want you to do is to click on the subscribe button. Your comments mean the world to us with anything that's resonated with you, and I absolutely love your support. I can't wait to go on this journey alongside you. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's get into today's episode.
Hi, my name is Yatin Mistry, and this is my tale to inspire.
Who are you? Where are you from? And let's go from there if that's fine.
All right, yeah, sure. So my name is Yatin Mistry. So said ethnically, it's Yatin Mistry. But obviously, it's interesting. So I start with that because obviously I'm an Asian man, and I come from two different cultures. So I was born in the UK. I'm proud to be British, but I'm also proud of my Indian ancestry and my Indian heritage. And figuring out that identity took years to kind of figure out. I went through a phase of being very ashamed to be brown, because I grew up in Basildon in Essex, and the school I went to was quite a interesting school where a lot of the parents weren't necessarily, exposed to the world. So, and I grew up in the 80s, right? So racism was very rife then. You had the BNP and Enoch Powell's, rivers of blood kind of speech not so long ago. So I kind of grew up with that. So I grew up with that kind of, being brown is, something to be ashamed of. And so that, you start to internalize some of that shame, inside quite deep. And it's just like, is it okay to be brown? I want to be white. It's not about wanting to be white. You want to fit in, right? That's actually what it is. You want to fit in with the majority. And so for me, it was about trying to fit into that culture. And at the cost of my own. So I remember going through a phase of being really ashamed of being brown. And then I heard about colonialism and the British Raj and all of this. And then it went the other way. I became really racist towards white people. And I was just like, how dare they? Because obviously I was judging all white people based on what happened back then, which isn't right. But at that stage, it's an evolution, right? So I went through a phase of being really racist towards white people. In my head, not racist outwardly, but in my head, how dare they? And then it took years to reconcile those two identities, because I was British, in the sense I was born in this country. I knew everything about this country. I'd gone back to India a few times as a kid. And as a kid, when you go back there, you're the foreigner. Even though you've got the same color of skin, you're still a foreigner there. And you get taken the biscuit out there. And it's just like, well, where do I belong? So that reconciliation of my identity was quite an interesting thing. And part of that comes to my name. My name is Yatin, but I will say Yatin because it's easier to say, right? If you try saying that, and I've been there many times, you try saying that to an audience of people, most will struggle. So you make things easier. But what is it that you make easier? Should you make your identity easier for other people? Because you are who you are, right? And that also brings in my queer identity, right? Should I hide my queer identity for you not to feel uncomfortable? Or should I be my true authentic self? Because if I'm not my true authentic self, what happens to me, right? It's at the cost of my mental health. Anxiety, stress, worry, all kind of fester within myself to try and be my own authenticity. So yeah, I went on a bit of a quest to figure out my identity and work out who am I, right?
What age are you looking at this? Like when you're thinking about identity, are you talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, or is it more into your teenage years or into adulthood? Like what age are you starting to have these light bulbs and these questions?
Yeah. So it was around probably about 13, 14. So the racism it's kind of been there since I was a kid. But the deeper questions of identities, at what point do you start really figuring out who you are as a person, right? At 13, 14, when teenage years kind of start, you start to think about it a little bit deeper. So it's around that time that I started thinking a little bit more about, who am I, my identity. It was around 15, 16 that I really started questioning it deeper. So probably 13, 14 that I found out about colonialism and all of that kind of stuff. And then, it was around that time that I kind of really started going a bit deeper within identity and who am I and being bullied out in India. Because I spent a year out in India as well, growing up. So my dad wanted us to settle out there when I was 11, and that's when the whole racism the other way kind of happened. Racism might not be the right word, but bullying the other way. And so, ashamed of being brown, ashamed of being white or British, So it was probably around 25, 26, I started to I went out to India. Actually, it was interesting. I gave up my career in the UK. So I haven't talked about this yet, but I have this whole spiritual side of me as well. And I felt like I'd been given a lot in my life. I've had a lot of grace. I like to use the word grace. Some people call it luck. Some people call it good fortune. I call it grace. I like that word because it feels spiritual. It's a nice word to use. And so I felt like I'd been given a lot. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to give back, and more at the grassroots level. So not giving money back, but wanting to help people, like at the deeper level. So I was thinking, well, what can I do? And I remember I was on the London Underground at the time because I was working in the City of London. And I came across this newspaper article. They used to give the Metro out back in the day. It was, the article I read was of some child in Africa or a group of people passing away because of famine out there. This was going back when I was 26, so 15, I can't remember, 20 years ago, something like that. And I looked at that article and I felt a few emotions. I felt disgust at myself because I was just like, here I am living this very cushy lifestyle. And there are people out there dying. There's something wrong here. There's a disparity here, you know? I could be helping that out. I could be helping out in some shape, form or other. And I felt revulsion at myself as well, that why am I not doing something? Because, you know, we get caught up in this Western lifestyle sometimes, and it's a wonderful lifestyle. But the problem with it is it doesn't actually give you a proper reality of what's out there. You know, the favelas in Brazil, and, you know, the poor people that are living in, you know, abject poverty in the slums of India, or, you know, in Africa, we're never privy to that. You see it on the news for 15 minutes, 9 o'clock news, and then you switch it off. We don't see that on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's one of the things of living in the West. You know, we've maybe gotten over that, or we've kind of helped ourselves through that process, but this stuff still exists. And, you know, when I saw that article in the news, and I guess with my spiritual makeup as well, and kind of wanting to give back, I was just like, I need to stop living this life in the West and go out and do something a bit deeper and more meaningful. And so I remember I went into work and I gave him my resignation. And that day, the day I saw that article, I was just like, I need to quit. So I was on a graduate program. I was working with Logica CMG, and I gave him my resignation. Now, my mentor at the time, because we were assigned a mentor, he knew my mentor disposition, and he was just like, okay, would you consider taking a sabbatical? And I was just like, I'm leaving. You know, you do whatever you want to do. Because I was quite good at what I did, kind of thing. I worked quite hard. I was quite a diligent worker. So he basically did whatever he did. And I got a phone call, I think about an hour later, right, Krish? And I was basically given a sabbatical. I could take it when I wanted, and I could take it for as long as I wanted. Now, this kind of stuff is unheard of in a corporate environment.
20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly, 20 years ago. Yeah, exactly. You know, to get a sabbatical takes like 6 months of paperwork and rigmarole and sign off and all of this kind of stuff. And then on top of that, the maximum they give it for is 9 months to a year tops, because people want to do a degree, or maybe they want to take a year out or something like this, but not for as long as you want it, kind of thing. And I felt, again, a bit of grace, kind of thing. I felt that if I went home to my Asian parents and said, Mum, Dad, I've left my job, you know, what? Yeah. You know? Whereas if I said, oh, Mum, Dad, I'm taking an extended holiday. Oh, very good. Very good, you know? So I think whichever gods are up there were looking down on me and saying, like, you know.
Amazing.
So yeah, I got this sabbatical, and I went out to India, and I had an amazing time. I went through what I would say an incredible character building time. And so when I say amazing, I'm going to clarify that. It wasn't joyous. I actually went through one of my deepest phases of depression out there, because I got out there thinking I was going to do this incredible work, you know, this amazing work of doing charity work and helping these people out. And you end up in a charity, and, you know, first week, you know, if you're dealing with kids, for example, I did work with all sorts of different charities. The kids love you for the first week because you're novel, right? You're amazing, you're new, you know, oh wow, you know. Second week, you're now a piece of the furniture. So now you actually have to work. And how do you do it? What do you do to now start to entice them in? And perhaps you don't speak the same language, because a lot of the work that I was doing, I didn't necessarily speak Hindi at the time. And I did quite a bit of work down south where I don't speak Tamil or Telugu or any of the other languages. So now you actually have to start working. And then there's a bit of like, what's the word? Cognitive dissonance. Here I am going out to do this. The reality is it's nothing like that, what I thought in my head. Now the real work starts. And half the work is actually doing the work with the kids. The other half is working out within myself. Why am I doing this? What's my purpose? Why am I coming out here? Was I coming out here to be this glorious person to help people out? Or was this some ego trip, thinking that I can actually help myself in some way? There was a lot of soul searching going on. And in that process, because I actually happened to go out to India, I discovered a few different aspects of myself. One I discovered was my cultural identity. I realized that I'm not Indian and I'm not English, but I'm British Indian. That resolved itself. Another one, interestingly, I haven't spoken about it yet, was my sexuality. So I'm a gay man. I had a lot of internalized homophobia. I thought, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I thought that it was a Western disease. Remember, I grew up a long time ago. There was no role models or any of that, certainly in the Asian community, let alone in the wider queer community. So I thought it was a Western disease, and there was a lot of internalized homophobia. That was able to resolve itself, and I figured out actually I'm a gay man, and then eventually I was able to actually, I'd say, ground my faith. And what I mean by that is when you're a kid, you're brought up with faith and you get given all these theories that you should do this and you should do that and God will love you if you do, whatever, you do these prayers and whatever else. But it's all theoretical. But when you're out there and you're on your own in a foreign country where you don't necessarily understand the culture to the point where you thought you might have, but you don't, and you're living in this, so wherever I used to work, I'd live with the people I was serving. So I did some work in, it's called Rampir Notekro. It's the second or third largest slum in India. It's huge. This slum is massive.
Whereabouts is it?
It's in the city of Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat. It's the biggest city in Gujarat. I didn't go to my 3-star hotel or 5-star hotel and come and help out in the slum. I lived in the slums. I found a homestay. Imagine this. I learned how to shower or bathe in half a bucket of water. 1 cup to weight yourself, lather up, and then 3 or 4 cups to wash off. After that, you've run out of water kind of thing. And that's an open bath. There's no, 3 walls and that's it kind of thing. The place I was staying was 2 rooms and a tin hut outside. The 2 rooms was the kitchen, the living room where everyone slept. And then tin hut outside was where me and the granddad took it in turns to sleep. I slept during the night. He slept during the day because he used to do a night shift kind of thing. So it's that level of poverty, let's just say. And I lived in that and I experienced that. And through that experience, there's a few things that I kind of understood. One was the hospitality of that country is just incredible. And that's my ancestry. That's the culture I come from. We have this thing called Atithaya Devo Bhava, which basically means your guest is God, basically. So if you go into a place, they treat you in this way. I remember there was one day, these are poor people, right? I gave you an idea of how poor they are. One day, the lady of the house, I used to call her Bhabhi, came to the house, as in someone had bought her, and she was bandaged up because she'd been involved in an accident. And the man of the house, Bhai and the Bhabhi, the man and them, were debating, do they spend money on medicines for her? Or do they spend that money feeding themselves for the week kind of thing? It was that level of poverty, And I remember overhearing this conversation, I went out and I was like, guys, don't worry, I'll pay for the medicines, it's not a problem. And they're like, no. This is what God has given us. We will solve this. We'll resolve this ourselves. And it wasn't arrogance. It was, this is our karma, this is what we need to kind of get through. This is our thing. We appreciate your help, but, thank you very much, but no thank you. I was bowled over by that. These are poor, when we think of poor people, we think of beggars, takers. These are, there's the expression, the rich man is the one that is not the one that has the most, but needs the least. And the poor man is not the one that has the least, but needs the most. Need, desire is what denotes wealth. These people were content with their lives. I couldn't believe it, Krish. Like, seriously. So all of these experiences started to kind of formulate my identity. And I realized that I come from this beautiful, rich country of so much spirituality and wealth, spiritual wealth. And yet also I come from another country which has a sense of beauty and, disciplineship and the way we treat people with respect and, don't get me wrong, in India they have that respect, but the way, it's a bit more of a patriarchal society in the way they treat women and the way they treat the poor in terms of their desensitization. Whereas here we have so many more charitable institutions and on a grander scale, But I'm a child of both cultures. So when I got back, I realized actually I'm a gay man, which I'll tell you about in a moment, and I'm a product of 2 cultures, and my faith solidified because through that experience, I got to live on my own, and I had to go through all of those experiences on my own, and I don't know, I guess it helped me to see the divinity within every human being, on an experiential level, not on a theoretical level, which my parents have given me to an extent, and not on an intellectual level where you get when you go to a church or a mosque or a synagogue or whatever, where you talk about it and you intellectualize. This is on an experiential level, true hospitality where these people are struggling, but they're not going to put that on me. They don't want me to be burdened with that because that's their karma, that's their thing too. I was just like, wow.
But it's so unusual to have that. It's the proof, and you only understand that if you feel it and you live it.
Yeah.
So you can come back and we can talk about it here and all that, but until, I guess, I always say living it is the best way to try anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't teach a person how to swim by reading a book.
No.
You tell them to get into the pool.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ways that really is that you've kind of shown people by, or shown yourself, proved to yourself, and identified, revealed yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's something, people say you found it, but actually I like the word revealed because actually all of this was already there.
Yeah.
But now you've gone on this quest to reveal yourself. So going into to being a queer man and having that identity and coming to this awakening, I guess you could say, and having the homophobic views of that, and you realising actually you are queer and that is who you are. How does that work? And obviously being part of the Asian community, and this brings a whole new dimension. So please feel free just to share, how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. So again, I grew up in the 80s. It was an interesting time to kind of be gay. Okay, well, when I grew up, I didn't even know I was gay. I was a late bloomer in the term. I'm a very late bloomer. I didn't figure out my identity, sexual identity, till much later. And some of it was cultural. Some of it was the culture we come from in the Asian community. We don't talk about sex, let alone sexuality. I remember whenever a sex scene would come on TV, my mum would stand up, right, gonna make the dal, gonna change, the channel would change. Yeah. She goes to the kitchen and everyone goes to the kitchen with that kind of thing. So there's always that joke, But what's interesting is sexuality definitely wasn't ever brought up. So I remember the very first gay kiss that ever happened on EastEnders. I can't remember how old I was, probably 12, 13. And it was two women kissing. And, when a sex scene came on TV, my mum would change the channel or go to the joke, make the dal and go to the kitchen. But when it was a same sex, my mother had such a visceral reaction. How can they show this on TV? This is disgusting, So imagine as a young child hearing that, thinking my identity is invalidated, my identity cannot be accepted, And then, I remember with my cousins, there was we were together, and I can't remember where we were, and there was a conversation going on, and one of the cousins was just like, oh, imagine if one of the cousins ended up being gay, and everyone was just like, oh, how disgusting would that be, Again, this was in the 80s, 90s kind of thing. So you grow up with that, and so you start to realize that, well, there's two things. One is you start to realize that what you have can't ever be exposed, can't ever be shown, right? But also what it starts to do is it starts to create this sense of shame within. There's something wrong with me. There must be something defective within me, because if everyone believes this, and we are a consensus-based society, if everyone kind of goes in one direction, we kind of follow that to an extent. There must be something wrong with me. So it creates this sense of shame, which then festers and can turn into something quite negative. But then, also, this homophobic society. And at the time, I didn't know it was homophobic. I don't actually, now I look back at it, I don't think it ever was homophobic. It was ignorance. And there's a distinction. I mean, I work, so I'm also a mindset coach and I work around that. And I work with my clients around this. But there is a difference between ignorance and homophobia. Now, don't get me wrong, there is homophobia out there for sure, so I'm not going to dismiss that. But you've got to work it out for yourself. So I went through that kind of experience. And so, as I said, I went out to India, and I was actually at a school. I was volunteering at a boarding school. And me and the headmaster became very friendly. We used to talk about lots of subject areas, really, really broad topic areas, brilliant. I loved it, very intellectually stimulating. And one day the topic of homosexuality came up. And he was just like, Yatin, what are your views towards it? And at that time I wasn't out. I remember at that time I had a lot of internalized homophobia. So I was like, I don't really, at that time I was just like, okay, I don't really have any thoughts on it. It wasn't I don't agree with it, but I don't really have any thoughts on it. And he was just like, that's interesting. So he was very friendly with all the kids at the boarding school. Friendly in the sense of professional, but had a good relationship. And he goes, every year maybe one or two kids will go up to him and say they have feelings for other boys, kind of thing. And this school was a very spiritual school. And I say spiritual in the sense that they woke up doing like prayers, and they woke up doing like, pujas and stuff like this, And so, and then, school day, extracurricular activities, more kind of, spiritual things, and then to bed. No Western influences. So I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, if in this remote area of India, children or kids or whatever must be coming up gay, then this has got to be natural. This can't be influenced or coerced in any way, you know? And that's when the penny dropped for me. I was just like, no, then I'm clearly gay. This, what I've been going through is my own shame. Do you know what I mean? And the cultural, I'm not going to blame anyone, but the cultural kind of blame, cultural infrastructures that I've kind of been navigating in a sense. And I remember literally, I was just like, right, I'm going to get home when I get home, because I was still in India at the time. I'm going to tell my parents. The first thing I'm going to do is I owe it to my parents to tell them that I'm a gay man, you know? And I remember when I came home, the first person I told was my brother, because I wanted to use him as a litmus test, because my brother would give me an indication of how my mum and dad might react. So I told my brother, and my brother just laughed. Initially, he just laughed. He's just like, he calls me Mota Bhai, which means older brother in my language. And he was just like, are you serious? And I was just like, yeah, after the laughing was over. And he goes, well, it doesn't change anything for me. I've just you've never shown anything to imply that you were gay, you know. And I was just like, it's just who I am kind of thing. And he hugged me, and that was that. And so I was just like, okay, so maybe my parents won't be so bad. Little did I know, you know. The conversation I had with my dad was not too bad, actually.
So you did a separate conversation with your mum and your dad?
Mum, dad, brother, all three different conversations.
Okay. Right.
However, what I did was I promised myself, I'd come back from India, I promised myself within a week I'm going to tell them. I didn't unpack my bag because I had no ideas how they'd react. They could have thrown me out. And to be honest, some kids are thrown out. In fact, some kids, even worse things happen, you know, to them, unfortunately, from beatings to honor killings, all sorts of stuff, especially in our communities, you know. It's something that needs to change. But so I wasn't sure. You know, remember, this is 15, you know, when I came out to my parents, I could have been fired for being gay at work, you know. It was that time. It's crazy. This country's made leaps and bounds. So told dad was, look, I still love you, son, which was really nice to hear. Actually, in fact, the first time when I told him, he was like, I'm not happy. We'd gone on a shopping trip, a typical DIY, you know, son and father. So we gone to the shop. Just as we got to the shops, my dad, because I told him, Dad, I'm gay, I'm not happy. Then we went in the shops, did the shop, came back out, and he's just like, but I still love you, but your mother's going to struggle with this, and society will struggle with this. And we left it as that. And I said to my dad, I was like, Dad, look, let me tell Mum. It's my thing to tell Mum. And he's like, okay. And then I think a couple of days later, I told Mum, and I was like, Mum, look, you know, I've got something to tell you. And I think she knew. And she just started crying. She's like, it's because you're gay, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah. Because on the day I arrived from India, Mum and Dad sat me down and said, right, I think I was 26 at the time. It's time to get you married. You know, when you start looking, I was like, Mum, Dad, I'm not interested in marriage, is what I said. Don't want it. Or did I say girls? I can't remember. One way or the other. It's one or the other. I can't remember now. I was interested in marriage, but not with women. Even though at that time I could never have seen a day where I'd be married to my other half. But there you go. So I told Mum, and she cried, and you know, she's really upset. And it was interesting. She blamed herself, and I was like, Mum, if you ever figure out what it was that you did to make me gay, there'd be 1,000,001 other mums that want to know to do something different, kind of thing. This is nature. It's not nurture. You didn't, because if there was something that you did that made me gay, then why is my brother not gay? You know, if anything, my brother has. I mean, I wouldn't say camper, but he's certainly more empathic, kind of thing. He's a wonderful guy, much more empathy than I have to an extent, which could be considered a gay quote. There's no such thing as a gay trait, but you know, if you were to kind of stereotype. So yeah, and if I'm honest with you, Krish, it took a year. The whole process of coming out took a year. And you know, when I work with clients and when I do, even with my friends and stuff, I'm like, it took me 26 years to come to terms with my sexuality. How can I expect my parents to come to terms with it overnight? That's unfair. Anyone that thinks their parents should just accept it, especially from our cultural background, it's different if you come from a very open-minded liberal background, perhaps. But if you come from a more orthodox or ignorant or not knowing about this stuff background, you can't expect your parents overnight. That's just unfair. And we know in our culture, we have this Matru Deva Bhava, Pitru Deva Bhava. Our parents are our first gods, right? There's a sense of respect and deference that we have. Yes, we have to educate them as well, but respectfully, you know? It's just like, oh, Mom, Dad, you don't get it, or, you know, you're not interested in my life. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a process of education that needs to happen. So it took a year. It took a whole year, and in that year, I didn't let that topic die. And it was difficult, Krish, every time. It was like every time I brought the topic up, it was like coming out again, and again, and again, and again. But what I knew at the back of my head was, people out there, they just need to accept it. I wanted my mum and dad to understand it. Acceptance is one thing, understanding is a different thing. I wanted my mum and dad to fully get it. And over that year, it was a challenging year, and we had all sorts of conversations, to the point where they took me to India to get me married to a woman, even though they knew I was gay. And I was just like, and I even went along with it, to the point where I remember it was like a week before the conversations were about to start. And I remember the conversation, we were in India, and I turned around to mum and dad and I was like, look, you've brought me up to be an honest kid. It's you guys are incredible parents, both me and my brother. My parents are incredible. They've put some really good values in me and my brother. And one of them was honesty. And it's the reason I told you I was gay. So when I meet that girl, because in our culture, you meet the girl and you have a chat, maybe the parents in the other room, kind of introduction. I'm going to tell her that I'm gay. I'm going to tell her I might not be able to have sex with her. I'm going to tell her that I might not be able to have kids with her. I'm going to tell her that this is actually under duress. I don't want to do this, but I'm being forced into this, but I want you to know that. And if you're okay with all of that, then let's go ahead. Because I had this thing at the back of my head that I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing even by my parents, if that made sense, Because if my parents knew what they were doing, but bear in mind, I'd kind of educated them that, look, what they're doing was wrong. But if they feel that was the right thing, then I'll go into this. And I remember mum and dad saying, no, you can't say that because everyone will know. I was like, no. If she doesn't find out today, she's going to find out some point in her life, right? Because I turned around to mum and I was like, mum, if you love dad half as much as my girl was going to love me, and you found out how dad was gay tomorrow, how would you react? She'd be devastated. I said, well, what's that going to do to the girl that I'm going to get married to? Your daughter-in-law, another person's daughter. Really, you want to put someone through that? And she's like, yeah, when you put it that way, kind of thing. Well, come on, let's use a bit of logic here. What you're doing, two reasons they came in from. One was to please society, and the second thing was they thought it would genuinely make me happy. So the genuinely make me happy, I kind of educate them. It's not going to make me happy. If you think this is going to make me happy, send me to prison, throw away the key. That'll make me happier than getting me married to another girl or another person whose life I'm going to potentially destroy. And then if kids come up, could destroy those kids' lives as well. Do you really want to do that? So, and those are the type of conversations we had over the year. It was heavy stuff.
That takes some serious courage to have those conversations.
It was heavy conversations, yeah. Because, I think, I'm very fortunate that we've been brought up in a very communicative family that we can. And also, I'm not docile, Chris. I'm quite an activist in many different ways, in many different regards. And so if I see a wrong, I will try to do my best to help in that process. And with my parents, I had to have these conversations because what they were doing was fundamentally wrong. It was a fundamental wrong, but they didn't realize that, right? It was not born out of malice. It was not born out of hatred. It was just not knowing what to do. You think every parent has some manual to know how to parent a kid? No, they fumble their way through, right? And in the same way, they're fumbling here. Now, at that stage, they were probably in their 45, 50. I'm coming up to that age soon, in the next 10 years, I'll be 50. I would have fumbled my way through life. So there's no rights and wrongs. And this is one thing that if our parents are doing something wrong, we do have actually a responsibility, respectfully and with reverence, to help them see the light. That is actually on us as kids, If we just let go, especially if you feel close to the parents, if you just let go of that, well, that's actually on you as well. It's part of our responsibility as kids, in my opinion.
It's a really powerful perception because especially in an Asian community, and actually knowing what the African community, especially in Uganda and different places is like, it's very much elder person, you just nod your head and accept it. But the way you've said it there is actually that's not being respectful to both parties. Yes. And it's really having that honesty. Yeah. But you just said something that really hit home with me was, it took you 26 years to get to where you got, and you can't expect your parents to take a day.
Exactly.
But also then, and it goes into the society and the community that we live in, that the only way that we can expect those people to change where they're at right now is to give them time, as opposed to then cancel culture. How dare you? It's having that compassion and understanding to support that person through that process, because their point A may be your point D. Their chapter 4 might be your chapter 7. You're way beyond that, but that was you 10 years ago. So it's having that community understanding, which is difficult because that takes honesty and you've got to create spaces.
100%. But what is difficult is the thing that will give you the most benefit, the most growth, the most reward in the end, right? If you, spend a day at the gym and then expect no results and give up, that's on you. If you spend 10 years at the gym and you get that result, that's also on you. It's up to you. One is easy, give up right on day one. The other is damn difficult for 10 years. But that slog and that difficult and that challenge gives you results. So it's on us. Sometimes, I'm not saying difficulty is a wonderful thing, but difficulty with a sense of understanding it stops being difficult, it becomes a challenge. There's a book called Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you've ever come across it. It's by Viktor Frankl. Okay. He was a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and he's a psychologist. And he went through the most horrible suffering, a person could go through, dehumanizing. His wife, children, and parents were murdered by the Nazis. He was made to do some of the most dehumanizing tasks known to man. Anyway, in the camps, he realized a few things, and he wrote about it in the book. But one of the things he realized was there would be other inmates that would fall ill. And inmates would fall ill with the same thing, because he had this psychology background, so he had this medical kind of background. Some inmates would survive, and some inmates would die. And he noticed that inmates that would die were ones that had no hope. The inmates that survived had hope. So they translated the suffering they were going through to, I'm going to live for my kids. I'm going to live for God is giving me the suffering because I'm going to do something better afterwards. I'm suffering right now because I'm going to grow through this. So those that could assign meaning to the suffering, it stopped becoming suffering and it became a challenge to overcome. Now this is, I don't wish that on anyone, obviously. But when we go through any challenge in life, and we can look at it as, how am I going to grow from this? How am I going to learn from this? What can I take away from this? It stops being suffering in a manner of speaking, and it gives you an opportunity to learn and grow from. But that's on us, right? How do we reframe it? How do we look at it? Do we look at it from the angle of victimhood, government's fault, the community's fault, my parents' fault, anyone's fault but my own? Or do I look at it as, I'm not going to assign fault, what happens happen. Can I look at, how am I going to grow from this? There must be something going on. Maybe I'll be a bit stronger. Maybe the next time I come across someone else who's gone through the same situation as me, I'll be able to advise them. Is that not a source of strength kind of thing? A way to be more compassionate and kind? So struggle isn't necessarily a bad thing. Depends how you see it.
And I love the way that you've talked about hope there as well, because I see us as generators of hope. Like one of my words and sentences I have, I'm a generator of hope. And I know the leaders of the 21st century, the people who are going to really lead, they have to be, it doesn't matter how good you are educationally, doesn't matter how academic you are, it doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, what colour your skin is. The number one thing, in my opinion, is you empower others. Can you empower others? Can you generate hope for others? And that, from one of the most difficult, darkest situations, to be able to do that is amazing. So where do you find yourself now? Yatin, where are you right now in your life? In terms of the queer community, in terms of your identity, but also in terms of your work and what you do and your own personal future and the society that you feel that you live in, where are you?
I'm in an amazing place. An amazing place. Because, so in terms of my queerness, I am just me kind of thing. It's interesting, identity. I think about identity a lot. So I probably my first identity is my spiritual identity. That's my primary identity. Everything else kind of comes secondary to it. And when I say spiritual identity, I define spirituality as the quest to become the best version of myself. With a book, without a book, with a God, without a God, doesn't matter. But to become the best version of myself, that to me is my spirituality. And I'd say that's the quest, that's the reason I've been put on earth kind of thing, to become the best version of myself. There's a quote by Marianne Williamson, and it's our deepest fear. It's a quote that Nelson Mandela used when apartheid ended in South Africa. Now, in that quote, I'm not going to say the whole thing because it's quite long, but in that quote, there is a sentence which is, when you let your light shine, you give others permission to do the same. And I think about this, as I become more authentic in myself, and I become more who I am and was born to be, other people may see that. I'm not doing it for other people, but other people may see that and be like, oh, and I've seen this in my own life, and I've seen that in and around people as well. Because people have that, I see someone else and be like, wow, they're being authentic. I want to be like that. It gives other people permission. It's crazy that. Why would you need permission to be good and be decent and be honorable and be, compassionate, kind, loving? But maybe it's the way the human psyche is designed at the moment, especially in the culture and the world that we live in. But so that's part of my mission right now, and that's where I'm at. So I coach, I do mindset coaching. I specialize within the queer space and the global majority. Or so the global majority, majority of the world, basically, not necessarily Caucasian, but I do everyone kind of thing. Because it's an opportunity to help people find themselves and, overcome their fears to become more authentically themselves, their true journey. I love that. I love that work, On top of that, I deliver workshops, public speaking and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of sharing that story, sharing. Most of the stuff I do will be something around helping people grow in some capacity or shape, form or other. I've done the city work. I did all that. I quit all of that, years ago. There's nothing wrong with it. I just got rid of it. I love being my own man. I love being my own boss, basically. I'm married to my husband, 11 years, incredible man, a kindred spirit, kindred soul. He is someone who thinks very similar to me in certain ways, not in all ways, but he holds me to account. And he is, it's amazing, that sounding board, that person. There's an expression, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most. And so it's incredibly important to surround yourself with people that are like-minded or aspirational in some form. It's like, you play a game of sport, I don't know, you play badminton, for example, and you're a B-class player, and you only play with people who are C-class, Is your game going to improve? Probably not. In fact, it's probably going to go down a grade, right? So the idea is to find people at your level or slightly above, so B+ or B++. So if you play against people like that, you're challenged, and they're challenged as well, but your game improves. So in the same way, the people that you hang around with is so important. And this is something I try to curate decent networks around me in different areas, in different fields. But my husband being one of them, I feel so blessed. And I often get asked the question, actually, it's interesting, how do you find your soulmate? And I always say, you don't find a soulmate, you create a soulmate. It's a process. When Nigel and I met, I don't think we were perfect for each other. I still don't think we're perfect for each other. But through the process of deliberation, debate, questioning, figuring out, introspection, deep introspection as well, you kind of start to figure out your core values and are they aligned? And if they are aligned, can you take that further? Can we empower each other in that process? So he's definitely one of the incredible people that I've got in my life.
Really, it reminds me of the expression: if you're the smartest person in the room, you should really be.
Yeah.
That's danger signs.
Yeah, of course it is.
Because you do not want to be the smartest person in the room. That really raised into. Yeah. Sorry. So that's where you find yourself right now, and who you are and what you're doing. And I want to say just a quick thank you. Now it's quick, but it's deep, because I'm not even saying thank you for this interview, or the interview you've done with Mads, or the interview you've done with everything. But thank you for being uniquely you. You didn't have to. It would have been much easier for you to be in a straight Indian or British Asian, but you could have considered yourself as an Indian, even though you've lived here your whole life, and stayed in the corporate job and not given a flying hoot about anyone else, But you read a newspaper article that changed your life forever, or you had a light bulb moment that changed your life and direction of it forever, and also impacted others. So thank you. And to have the realization that you ain't stopping is super. I'm buzzing. I can't wait. We're going to be doing some really cool stuff together in the future, and I can't wait. How do people find out about you? Where do they get hold of you? Yeah,
so my website's yatinmistry.com. So pretty easy if you can spell my surname and first name. And Instagram's the other big place that so I'm Yatin Inspire at Yatin Inspire, and my LinkedIn profile if you want to reach out as well, which is Yatin Mistry. You get on any one of those, you'll find any of my other bits and pieces as well. But obviously contact you and you can get in touch with me as well.
Yeah, it'll be all of everything that we post as well. I do have a final quick fire question game, which we'll play, and then we'll go into 2 questions that we ask every Tales to Inspire ambassador. So the rules are, it's going to be, I'm going to ask a question and you're going to answer it, and there's no explanation needed. So essentially, quick fire, let's see where we go. I've actually prepared these questions, so I'm just going to get the
Yeah, no worries. Sounds good. I always like things like this. It's fun. Keep me on my feet, on my toes.
First question is, if you could give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Be your authentic self.
How much of where you are at right now is down to luck or grace, and how much of it is down to hard work?
I'd say all of it is down to divine grace.
Education should be?
for everyone.
Oh, I love that. Parents should.
Love their kids unconditionally.
A true community.
Is the one that supports and nurtures all of the individual members.
Oh, I love that. If there's one government law, it's the Yatin Mistry law, and it's going to be put in place in society, what would that law be and why?
It would be to help inspire, encourage, and what's the word I'm not after? Empower citizens to do their bit for society.
I love that. Like that acts of service kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah. But empower them, not
Yeah.
you have to do this.
Yeah.
They are responsible for helping empower, inspire, everyone to do. Let the light, as you let your light shine. Oh, sorry, we're not supposed to explain. As you let your light shine, you give others permission to do the same. If you start a ripple effect, pay it forward, it'll spread.
I love that. So the final two questions, Yatin, that I've asked every single Tales to Inspire guest, over 150 people. That first one is, Yatin Mistry, what is your definition of the word inspire?
Inspire? It's be your authentic self. It is literally be your authentic self. Your job is not to inspire anyone. Your job is to inspire yourself. If you inspire yourself to your greatest heights, other people will naturally do whatever. Gandhi said, if you want change in the world, be that change. I like that principle. Works for me.
And my final question is, if you were to live until 105 years old and you've lived the most fulfilling life that you want to have lived, what's the proudest, most impactful thing that you want to have achieved during your lifetime?
Serve people to the best of my ability.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yatin, thank you so much for being on the Tales to Inspire podcast, mate.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, awesome. Loved it.
Thank you for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please leave a comment in the comment section below, and we cannot wait to see you for our next episode.